Tonight, we have Alex Vassar. He is a delightful presenter and storyteller. He has worked at the municipal and state levels of government for more than 2 decades, including for the San Jose City Council, both houses of the California State Legislature, and as a governor's appointee. Currently, he works as the communications manager for the California State Library. So please welcome Alex Vassar.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. There's a famous quote by Niels Bohr, who was a physicist, and he said, sometimes the opposite of a great truth is another great truth. History belongs to all of us. History belongs to everyone. And that's true. But the opposite of that is also true. History belongs to those who remember. Those who remember have the greatest stake in preserving and protecting history. And so by being a member of the Sacramento Historical Society, you are having a more active role in the preservation of history, which is exceptionally important. There is so much history that gets lost, historical artifacts that get lost every day. I have seen examples of items that ended up in the trash because there was not space at that moment for it. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. One thing I want to talk about was how I got here. I had an unusual path to Sacramento. Sacramento is one of these great places that everybody comes to. And you've also got a lot of folks that have been here for generations. I'm relatively new. I've been in Sacramento for not quite 20 years now. But what I thought, what can I offer to people who have lived here for so much longer? So I found it. So I was born in Panama. My parents were marine biologists. And Panama is the route that so many of the early residents of Sacramento used to come here. That is me being held by a member of the Kuna Indian tribe in Panama. But if you look at Panama's role in the gold rush and in Sacramento history, Panama, the canal zone crossing over the isthmus, was the sieve. Only the tough made it across the peninsula. And so you look at the folks that came here early on, and it was sometimes rough and tough, but in all cases tough folks that came across and came to California. And so I do like to think of myself as, I'm one of the last people that came to Sacramento the old way. My mother studied algae, seaweeds, and she so loved seaweeds that, people don't believe this, she named me Alexander Gregory so that she could call me Algae. It's true. Yeah, this is true. So it was an interesting upbringing. Grew up. She worked for the Monterey Bay Aquarium and the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, and I think that was one of the things that really convinced me that you could spend your career focused on something that most people don't necessarily think about. For me, it was California state government. And so you got the state of California, and it is such an interesting world. My particular specialty is the California State Legislature. There have been about 4,500 people that have served in the California State Legislature since 1849. We are in the 175th year of California State. Well, we're getting there. September. We'll actually cross into 175. But working for the state library, the state library existed actually prior to statehood, and so we turned 175 last Friday. Other state agencies, State Archives is a little bit older than us, but yeah, we were all prior to statehood. In fact, and that's one of the things most folks don't know, is the California State Legislature actually started calling itself the California State Legislature before there was a state of California. They first met December 15th, 1849, and yes, we are the state legislature. So I came to Sacramento in 2007 as a participant in a program called the Senate Fellows Program. It's a 1-year paid internship where you get to work in a legislator's office, and it was fascinating. It was a really great experience. You get to see how things work and start to make your mark. You get to learn about how things work. And so, having studied the history of the legislature before I got here, I spent my year really trying to study the institution, how it worked, how the members got along, which is really hard to see from a low-level staffer perspective. Once you're there for a little bit, you figure out. So they're not all popular with each other. I don't know, hopefully it doesn't come as too much. But any group of people, if you have any group of people, with the state senate as an example, anytime you have 40 members, 40 people in this room, okay, right? I shouldn't say this. Anytime you have a group of people this big, well, not this Sacramento Historical Society, but usually, there's going to be at least one really bad person in the room. And there's going to be at least one really good person, and there will be smart people and less smart people. It's this group of people that have been selected by their neighbors to represent them in the state legislature. And so that's what I love most about the state legislature is it's this great snapshot of who California is. Who do Californians choose to represent them in Sacramento? So these are some pictures of my fellows here. It was a great experience. And so I would encourage you, if you know anybody who's finishing up, you have to be at least 20 years old and have an undergraduate degree to participate in this program. And it really does give you some interesting insights into government and some interesting insights into what you do and you don't want to do with your career. We got to go on field trips. One of my favorite, this is the Bay Bridge when it was under construction. It's very illegal to take a picture in this location now. You can't do it. And so it was really interesting to see how government works because government is so involved in so many parts of our lives. And one of the really cool things about working for the state legislature, if you work for the state legislature, you can call any department and say, I'd like to come to a field trip. And they'll host you. Yes. Hi, CHP, can we do a ride along? Absolutely. Hey, Department of Water Resources, can we do a tour of a dam? I want to see how a hydroelectric plant works. Yes. Yeah, they will show you. They want to teach you. They want you to understand. And so it's this beautiful thing where you just get to almost bathe in information when you work for the state legislature. You're surrounded by really smart people, really hardworking people, and it really spoils most other jobs for you for the rest of your career because of the quality of the people that you get to work with. Any career has its reputation. So if you work for the legislature, everyone assumes you're smart, but you're canny, you've got secrets, you're working on stuff. When you work for a library, everybody loves you. If somebody comes in and there's, I really need this information, I'm trying to get this information, can you help me? And you can't, like, I'm not able to help you answer that question, they say, oh, but you tried. Thank you so much. I go, oh, this is great. I love this. So I arrived at the library almost 8 years ago, and I work in the communications office. And at the time, when I arrived at the library, we were doing what every other communications office does in state government. And that is, we answer questions about ourselves. If you have a question about the state library, call us, and we'll answer it. We got about one call every 6 months. So what we started doing was we said, well, we have 4 million books. We have a massive collection. Ask us a question about anything. If any reporters in the state have any questions about anything to do with California history, ask us, and we will do research for you, and we'll answer those questions. And we started getting really weird questions. It was amazing. And so we learned about stuff. We got to know, it really helped us. We got to know our collection better. So the things I like about working at the library, one of the big ones is the people. We have a great staff who work to answer questions from our general collection. So this is photos of two of our staffers from the general collection. We also have a law library. So the California State Law Library has materials dating back to the age of pirates. So we have laws on international piracy laws, international space laws. What are the rules for ownership of the moon? We have a government publication section that is the federal depository library for, it's the regional federal depository library. So you have colleges and universities around the state, like UC Davis or Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, would have part of the collection. They might have the Department of Agriculture collection because it ties in. As the regional depository, we have the entire federal collection. We also have the Braille and Talking Book Library, which is a library that serves print-disabled people from around the state. So for the majority of the state, if you're not able to use regular books because of a print disability, that could be dyslexia, that could be damaged eyes, we have a program where we will send out books on tape. They're actually on USB drives now to help you access materials. And so we have staff that are waiting there in the reading rooms to answer questions. This is part of our room where we have a new mural up on the wall. And we had a mural that was painted when the library opened. And it's amazing. It's 65 feet wide, painted by Maynard Dixon. who's a famous painter of the American West. And it's a little dated. So it's kind of how California history was perceived at the time. And so there was a request to update the mural. Can't do it. It's historically listed. And so we added additional sections showing kind of California's modern population, the variety of folks that we have in the state today. On the same floor, we have the government publications reading room. They don't look terribly exciting right there. Those are Senate journals. Really cool, ridiculously cool books. But with that little beige cover, they don't look fascinating, but they are, I promise. We have a second building that's right across the street, 900 N Street, and one of my favorite things, we have an underground tunnel that connects the two. So it's about 20 feet under N Street. I like to say it's the safest place you can possibly be in downtown Sacramento. We've got the California History Room and the Braille and Talking Book Room on the first floor. We have the largest collection of newspapers, physical collection of newspapers in the state of California. As I said, we have hundreds of thousands of photographs. So these are some of my favorite photos from the collection. So this is, I just love, this was from the Punitive Expedition, with the war against Pancho Villa in Mexico. And I love that you have these soldiers, and you can tell who the young one is. I love that picture. I saw it the first time. I don't believe there's a note on it, so we don't know who it is, what the story was. I love these pictures of Sacramento where they have weather we're not used to. Because we do. We have these, every once in a while, we'll have a hailstorm. We had one, I think, in 2017. This is a picture from right after the earthquake in San Francisco. The collection includes books published by foreign governments. These are pretty wild. So this is how the Soviet Union was portraying their successes during the early years. They were exaggerating a little bit what they were accomplishing at that time. But it is interesting to see what they were reporting, and it was the shortfalls between what they were reporting and what people were actually experiencing that makes these such interesting resources. We have a map room where we have hundreds and hundreds of maps from throughout California history, every part of the state, earthquake maps, hazard maps, everything. And so people are able to come in and access that. We also have a large collection of items that aren't really related to California state government, and so, but were kind of standardized textbooks. And so it's fascinating to see what people thought was important, what's important to hang on to as the years go by. Is absolutely fascinating. The library also has a part that helps send out grants to libraries around the state, where you can check out a pass to a state park at your local library. You just check it. It's just an item you can check out. Most libraries, Sac Public, they have about 20 on hand. There's no wait. You walk in, I want to go to Folsom Lake. You check it out, you go use it, that's it. So I've been at the library it's coming up on 8 years now, and I've spent some time studying the history of the state legislature. State legislature has existed for quite a while now. We've had thousands of people. The latest count as of the start of the current session is 4,523 people have served in the California state legislature, which may sound like a lot, but it's really not. What's really crazy is if you look at the number of judges in California, there is almost that number of judges serving right now in California as all of the lawmakers that we've had since statehood. And here's a number that I calculated. It's 222 have represented Sacramento County. It is a wild 222. One of my favorites was not Sacramento County. It was a state senator from Los Angeles, Alexander Crittenden. So Alexander Crittenden was enrolled as a student at West Point, and he played a prank. I love this. He played a prank, and he got kicked out of West Point. He walked to the White House, requested a meeting with Andy Jackson, and got his expulsion overturned. And I think, as a college student who's been kicked out of college, to request a meeting with the President of the United States to get your expulsion overturned is amazing. And so he came out, was one of our first legislators, and was murdered in front of his family by his mistress. So, who was actually, and she was she was the widow of one of the U.S. senators from Nevada. So, as I like to say, questionable life choices. So of the 222 that have represented Sacramento County. The longest serving was Leroy Green. Leroy Green was first elected. He served starting in 1962, and he left office after term limits began in 1998. And I believe he died in 2002, and his widow died in 2012. One of the first things that came my way was when the estate sold their house. They did a final walkthrough of the estate in Carmichael, and they realized nobody had gone in the garage. So they opened up the garage, and all of his legislative papers had been donated to Sac State. And sometimes they called him a World War II vet, but he was in engineering school until after the Japanese surrender. But he was in Japan during the Reconstruction efforts. And before he deployed, he was living in New Jersey. His mother bought him a hunting knife because she was really concerned about his safety. I have the hunting knife. That was one of the things that was, he came back and he wrote up, it was about 20 pages. A young man back in New Jersey, when he came back from Japan, writing about his experiences during the Reconstruction of Japan. It is an amazing story. And so I ended up with Leroy Green's personal papers, which was fascinating because I never met him, but I know him really well. The shortest serving legislator was P.B. Cornwall. He was from the very first legislature, the very first session of legislature, and he was the last surviving member of the first legislature. He served 43 days, and then he decided he'd rather do other things. So I don't know. I don't know. That's not necessarily correlation that he only served 43 days and he lived the longest. James Russell Vineyard represented two different districts that were 385 miles apart. He represented Sacramento in the Assembly and Los Angeles in the State Senate. That's one of the, he's in the top 10 longest distance apart districts ever. And he was the oldest member of the State Senate in 1863 at age 58. Prior to coming to California, he served in the Michigan Territorial Legislative Council in the 1830s, and he stabbed one of his fellow legislators to death on the floor of the legislature. Oh, sorry, he shot him. There was also a knife involved, but the actual wound was a gunshot. And then he came out to California in the 1840s and served in the Assembly in the 1850s and the Senate in the 1860s. 10 of California's state legislators, and this is another good illustration of just how far apart people come to Sacramento. So it's 10 of Sacramento's state legislators have come from other parts of the United States and served in state legislatures other than ours. The oldest member of the Senate from 1863 had previously been from Sacramento. The oldest member of the Assembly in 1863 was 70 years old, and it was Charles Duncombe. So Charles Duncombe was born in Connecticut, 1792. That was one of the earliest births for any state legislator we've ever had. And he moved to Canada, renounced his U.S. citizenship, and was elected to the Legislative Assembly of Upper Canada. Then he led an insurrection against the Canadian government. And it's a wild story. So it didn't go well. It really did not go well. And so it collapsed almost immediately. I think part of the contingent ended up hiding on an island near Niagara Falls. It was a weird, it's weird times. And so the government of Canada sentenced him to death. So he fled back across the border, said, Sacramento. And so he moved to Sacramento. Actually, before he came to Sacramento, he started his own paramilitary secret society called the Hunters Lodge. They were based in Cleveland, and they recruited 40,000 men, and they launched the Patriot War against Canada, which was a secondary conflict. It was a little bit more successful, also didn't work. So then he left the East Coast. He said, that's it. He was elected to the Sacramento City Council, and he was elected to the Assembly in 1858, and served all the way from January 3rd to January 22nd. Just wild career. At that point, the state assembly voted to expel him, saying that he was ineligible because he had renounced his U.S. citizenship. When he became a Canadian subject, he was not eligible to hold an office in the state. So the assembly voted 46 to 27, which that's solid. That's a solid majority. That he was ineligible to serve, and he was kicked out of the assembly. His seat was declared vacant. So the governor called a special election, and he won. And what I, yeah. And so he was elected, and they had the decision: or do you seat him? Do you allow him to rejoin? And it was March 3rd, which is not that long. I mean, that was really fast special election. They take substantially longer now. They voted 32 to 31, really close, to neither accept the election results nor deny them. And so the seat remained vacant for the rest of his unexpired term. And then he was reelected in 1862. And he served. And it's these characters, I love these characters. It's such fascinating people. So yeah, to wrap up, Sacramento County's state legislators, 63 were born in California, 130 were born in other states, New York being the leader. 16 were born outside of the United States, which is higher than most other parts of the state. That is significantly higher. And 13 we don't know. With the early legislators, so often all we know is their first and middle initials, their last name, where they represented, their party, and the session they served in. That's it. And so I have been working on it, trying to figure out who these folks were. I've found birth dates and death dates. That's the best way to do it. Once you have those, you can track down a lot of information. There was one member who was fascinating. He's the only legislator from now back to the 1870s that I couldn't find a date of death for. If you're born in the 1870s, most likely you're not here anymore. But he was elected to the assembly in it was about 1915, and he wasn't Sacramento, so your reputation is good. He was Central Valley, and he came up. He served a session, and then after the session ended, this is where it gets bad. He wrote a bunch of checks, and then disappeared and left his wife and I forget if he had one kid or two kids, but abandoned his family, a bunch of uncashed checks, and fled and disappeared. And it turned out he was elected to the assembly under an assumed name. He was a con man. And that is why we know when he was born. We have no idea what name he died under and when he died, which is, it's one of the big mysteries. We don't know that. And so that was one of the things I really enjoyed writing about that, kind of trying to tell that story about what happened. What are these people thinking? They are really interesting folks. Also, this other breakdown. So of the folks that have represented Sacramento in the legislature, 15 have been women, 207 have been men. You might notice those are not equal. It has been coming up quite a bit. This is the first session where we've had a large number of women in the legislature. I believe the women have the majority of the state senate in this session, but it's still coming. It's still, when you look at the overall numbers, it's not a lot. There's room to grow. Of occupations, 30 worked in legal professions, 20 in business, 18 in agriculture, and that includes all kinds of things. Folks selling tools for implements of farming, everything. 9 were in education, 6 were in medicine. And so the legal professions, that attorneys, lawyers, one of my favorites, the folks that worked in business, the 20 that worked in business, one of them was, he listed his occupation as steamboating. Like, what? That's cool. We don't do that anymore. And of the 17 who did agricultural occupations outside the legislature, included farmers, ranchers, and wine grape growers. And the single most common was ranchero, which I was like, that's cool. We need more of that. That's a cool occupation title. And the last one I wanted to mention, in terms of the 6 that were in medicine, the very first registered nurse to ever serve in the state legislature was Jean Moorhead Duffy, who represented Sacramento. She was like Citrus Heights. She was first elected in 1978. And then my last thoughts, there is so much California history that gets thrown away every year. It was 2019. I got a telephone call from the family of Nelson Dilworth. He was a state senator. He served from 1937 to 1960, which was a fascinating era in California state government. The CSU system was expanding. State water project was growing. We had a committee on un-American activities. It was during the Cold War. He was the vice chair of un-American activities. And they said, we have his papers. Would you like it? And I said, yes. Well, what's the alternative? And they said, the alternative, we would like to either give it to you personally or we will have it destroyed. I said, yeah, no, I'll do that. And so drove down to Riverside. These questionable life choices. And went down to Riverside and picked up, it was a moving truck. It was 200, cubic feet, those banker's boxes? So 200 banker's boxes of his papers. It was every piece of mail that he received in 24 years in the legislature. And there was some crazy stuff in there. And so I always think it's interesting, the folks that I have gotten to know that I never knew. Reading someone's letters gives you such interesting insight into how they phrased things, how they thought, what they were thinking about. And so be careful with the things that are entrusted to you. If you have an old book, take care of it. My favorite thing that we say in the archival world, in the preservation world, is to treat your historic documents, your photographs, your family Bibles, they say treat it like grandma. So you always ask yourself a question. So I have an old photo album. It's like, should I keep it in the attic? It's like, would you keep grandma in the attic? Well, most homes in Sacramento don't have basements, but we have a basement. No, I'll keep the photo album down there. And it's like, would you keep grandma in the basement? And the other one, that's the third version of that, is in direct sunlight. It's like, would you keep grandma in direct sunlight all day, every day? It's like, you shouldn't. So when you're thinking about how you're going to handle stuff, keep your historic documents in parts of the house where you want to live, where you want to be, because that tends to be better temperature ranges. Temperature ranges are what will really destroy things. So the hotter it is or the more humid, those are bad for historic items, but it's the fluctuations. It's the expansions and contractions of the paper. That's what causes the damage. So if you can keep things in your living space, that is what will extend their lives. Thank you all. I really appreciate it.